So welcome all, Zishan. Thank you to everyone for joining. Super excited to have everyone here. Really excited today. We're joined by Tim Tayshun Curry from the BBC's Missing Cryptoqueen podcast series. We've previously had a real life curry with Jamie Bartlett from the series, which was amazing. He told us so many stories, but Tim's been following the case since day one, and especially the latest court cases. So will be telling us hopefully some behind the scenes stuff and some of the latest news from the Onecoin case, so which claimed to be a cryptocurrency, was never really a cryptocurrency, never had a blockchain, but a really exciting case around a $15 billion Ponzi scam. So Tim, over to you. I'll let you speak everything. We've got co-host Ryan Hanley, who was MD of Token Market, who will be asking lots of probing questions. So grateful to Ryan for joining. And to everyone throughout, we want these Crypto Curry live chats to be as interactive as possible. So please do, any point during the conversation, if you've got any comments to make, post points in the chat. And also we've got the Q&A function. So if you go to the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A function. So please put any questions there at any time. And Tim will be very happy to answer any questions. So thank you, Ryan. And Tim, please share details about the Onecoin.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with like how I got interested in it. Because, you know, coming from a crypto background, I've been into, been following Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies since I was introduced to it in March of 2013. And it was on the 15th of March, the Ides of March, that my friend had been talking to me and saying, hey man, you really got to check this out. You know, coming from your background, you're a Ron Paul supporter, you're kind of an audit the Fed guy, you're a libertarian. I wasn't a tech guy, but anyways, he's like, you really need to check this out. He had kind of nudged me back in February of 2013, but I really didn't look into it until March 15th when he told me about Andreas Antonopoulos. And so on March 15th, I began watching some Andreas videos, and I was really excited, to watch these. And I was like, wow, this could really be something cool. And I remember it was a week later on the 22nd of March, which would be my birthday. So I called my dad on March 18th. And I'm like, hey dad, why don't you get us each a Bitcoin? They're like $37. It's complicated, but we got to figure this thing out, right? And it wouldn't be until April 1st that I bought my first Bitcoin. And moving in that sphere, I was never like a Bitcoin investor. I was more of a, I really enjoyed the philosophical things that it presented. So fast forward 2 years to the end of March of 2015, and I get a call over Facebook from a dude named Jason Richard Mangan, who had said, hey, I checked out your profile. I saw you're into cryptocurrency. You got to check out this new cryptocurrency. It's run by this, innovative woman who is a double PhD, blah, 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 who's talking about Ruja Ignatova. And you got to check it out. I'm all, sure, I'll check it out. Cool. So he sends me to the site, onecoin.eu, which immediately I could see that it was not just an amateur page, but it was written by someone who didn't know anything or understand anything about cryptocurrency. And so within about 3 minutes, I was able to identify it as a scam, which anyone on this webinar would have been able to do at that time.
So Tim, what were the kind of things that you saw on the site that like instantly alerted you to this being maybe not as kosher as some of the other projects out there?
Right. So the most immediate things that alerted me to, hey, yellow flag, red flag, is that, number one, this was supposed to be a big cryptocurrency company. Immediately, I noticed that there were grammar and spelling errors on this site from supposedly a huge company. And a huge company or a big project, regardless of where it's at, where it's from in the world, is not going to have numerous grammar and spelling errors, etc. But the lexicon itself just was not crypto speak, if you will, and all it was about hype about how they're going to be the next Bitcoin and they have a centralized solution that is going to
so much easier to manage,
and
centralized. So, you know.
Was there anything differentiating it from all of the ICOs?
Yeah, this is almost like, this is really before the ICO craze. I mean, there was a few ICOs that has started up. I'm actually wearing one of them, the Augur, which Jeremy Gardner and a few others launched on Ethereum. That was one of the very first ICOs, which raised like 30 million in the first, minute or whatever it was when the ICO thing started. But it wasn't any sort of a technology project based on the website. I mean, there was nothing there that would indicate what they were doing different or who were the leads or, the development team or what problems really it was solving, anything like that, other than just rah, 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 we're going to be the next Bitcoin. And, the Bitcoin pizza guy sold, Lazaro or whatever, sold his, Bitcoins, 10,000 Bitcoins for 2 pizzas. And if he hadn't, he would have X amount of millions of dollars. And it was just a lot of hype and a lot of, kind of name grabs and story grabs and stuff like this. So immediately I told the person who had contacted me, I'm all, bro, this is a scam. You need to get your money out if you can. And he's like, no, it's not a scam. He was really, really adamant that, and kind of butthurt about the whole thing, which was, there was a lot of heavy pushback about it. He's all, no, you just don't understand. This is a centralized, project. You're just into Bitcoin and you can't see, how another project would work. And I'm like, no, dude, this is no good. And so he just urged me. He's all, no, you got to see this video, and I asked him, I'm all, what is this, how does their mining work? What is the, what is their, what is the value added? And by the way, I'm a little bit slow thinking right now because it's 7:30 in the morning for me and or maybe 8, but I usually don't get up this early if I don't have to. So I'm drinking my coffee, so hopefully the biological synapses will start snapping a little bit better.
No worries. So, Tim, just in terms of, so obviously, this thing, it was, to the informed viewer, a little bit poorly presented, poor grammar, kind of grabbing terms from various different projects, kind of fudging them together. Yeah. One of the defining things about this scam was this thing ripped through countries rapidly, quickly, growing, and it built this cult-like strength for people who defend this thing despite all contrary evidence. I mean, what were the kind of the sort of the methodologies that they were using to allow it to grow in this kind of way? How did it wrap people in so quickly and so strongly?
Right. So it would be utterly ridiculous to believe what they were saying unless Bitcoin hadn't already done it. So if they were saying, we're going to give, this project is going to make 10,000 or 14,000% ROI, which they actually advertised at some points. So 14,000% ROI. Anyone in their right mind would be like, that's ridiculous. That's obviously a scam. But what they were doing is they were saying, well, look at what Bitcoin did, and giving examples of Bitcoin doing a 14,000% ROI. So people that had no background in crypto, blockchain, tech, economics, etc., looked at this and were like, wow, they did, Bitcoin did this. And this woman who's leading this is a double PhD and did manage, major hedge funds. She managed a $250,000 hedge fund, by the way, in Bulgaria called CSIF. And so when they ripped off Andreas Antonopoulos and all of the, big gurus in crypto and in Bitcoin, and basically just regurgitated what we'd all been sold on and pitched it as what their product was doing, but better. And that's how it ripped through so many countries. But the other way that it ripped through so many countries is that they taught that propaganda, that doublespeak, that, you know, this pitch. They packaged the pitch. They did their main presentations. They had a few leaders that were good at pitching that, and those leaders found more good leaders who were good at doing that. And through that pyramidal type of system, they kept stamping more and more so-called leaders that were good at that could talk the talk and hype up crowds and things like this. They built an all-star soccer team, if you will, but not a soccer team, a multi-level marketing scam team that could pitch this all around the world. And that's how it spread. And it was very lucrative for anyone who can pitch it well and get an audience to listen. They can make a lot of money.
So you said that anyone would be able to tell that it was a scam within a couple minutes, anyone from the crypto space. What did they do?
Anyone in the crypto space would be able to tell that it was a scam.
So what did they do to stop people from the crypto space finding out about it and spreading word that it was just a scam?
Repeat that question.
What did
Erica?
they do to stop people from the crypto space finding out about it and spreading word that it was just a scam? Because most people
They just called us jealous haters who were trying to destroy their project because they know it would overtake Bitcoin. That's
right.
Literally what they did. Absolutely.
And I think one of the other things they did incredibly well was they were able to almost target community leaders within certain areas. So in terms of the marketing, it was almost like they weren't trying to really target real crypto enthusiasts who, you know, kind of understand the real mechanics of how
Right.
cryptocurrency would work, but more go in via, you know, we heard cases through the podcast from church leaders and people who are well established in the community, convincing them, and then having that kind of, you know, drip down effect into these kind of communities, potentially slightly outside of the more kind of technical, let's say, crypto enthusiasts.
So here's what, this is what they did. They go, you know what? Bitcoin is for nerds. You know, Bitcoin, the only people that are, you know, following Bitcoin are these super tech guys, and they're nerds. And although Bitcoin was a good idea, we're going to make it simple. And you guys don't have to worry about any of the technical stuff. We're going to take care of it for you. For instance, rather than setting up, you know, these and they never even use the word ASICs, of course. Rather than setting up expensive computer equipment to mine coins, what we've done is we've taken care of all that for you, and all you have to do is push a button, and that will mine your coins. That'll put your coins into the mining pool, and then sometime later, you put your tokens into the mining pool, and sometime later, those will produce the coins for you. So it was literally one-click mining or whatever.
So you've been following the case super closely the whole time, and especially in recent months with the trials coming up. What can you tell us that isn't necessarily public knowledge? What can you share that's the latest about the case?
Well, to catch everyone up to speed, the justice system grinds very, very slowly, but very, very finely. So at the end of last year in September, one of the attorneys who was responsible for laundering what the FBI and Department of Justice estimated at $400 million, which is less than 10% of what OneCoin took in, only just between late 2014. It started in around September of 2014. Its mining started in January of 2015. And by the end of 2017, the DOJ said that they had taken in at least 4.6 billion. Now, what's important to know is that that is money primarily that had gone through bank accounts and traditional payment methods, wires, transfers, things like that, which can be tracked to some extent. But much of this was on a cash basis, cash to your upline and things like this. So when Mark Scott was convicted, it was Ruja Ignatova's brother, who helped convict him, who admitted that OneCoin was a criminal organization, a fraud system, that there was no blockchain, of course. And mind you, Constantine was looking at 90 years in prison for the 4 charges that were being brought against him, which was wire fraud, conspiracy, and bank fraud, and things like this. So he was looking at a 90-year prison sentence. He's like 35 or 36 years old, just had a kid, and he was going to spend the rest of his life in prison for sure. So he did decide to cooperate with the Department of Justice, the U.S. authorities, in order to aim for a reduced sentence, whether that be maybe 20 years out of 90 years served. That would be a great, discount, I guess. Or, all of this is up to the judge as to what the judge decides. But he could, in theory, be let go. And, for cooperating. It's possible. It's unlikely, I think, but it's possible. And the Department of Justice was talking about, because of the threats that his testimony has put him in a pretty tough situation, that would give him, he would have to change his identity and basically live a completely new life, because certainly he would be hunted down and killed. So for him to testify against his sister, against his own mother and father, who, by the way, never offered any proof of blockchain or anything like this during this case, that's pretty heavy. That's blood against blood. He tried to get bail so that he wouldn't have to be stuck in the jail system, and had offered like $20 million, and then said, whatever amount that you want to secure my bail, we're happy to give. So his folks did, offer tens of millions of dollars in bail. But of course, this is stolen money from the victims. And so the courts are not going to accept stolen money from the victims in order to secure his bond. So Constantine was supposed to be sentenced in July, but more recently, Gilbert Armenta, who is also attorney, and Sebastian Greenwood, who was the co-founder of the company OneCoin, and Ruja's original partner, who was captured in Thailand in September of 2018, his trial date is coming up. Now, COVID has delayed some of these processes, and Sebastian Greenwood's trial lawyers have said, look, under normal situations, we would be able to meet with him for hours on end, 5 days a week, in order to build our defense. And under COVID, it's been, more like just several hours a week over, Skype or Zoom calls or whatever. So that trial date has been pushed back to October of this year, and Constantine's sentencing has subsequently been pushed back to November of this year. And all of these dates have kind of been kicked down the road just due to various, influences in the system. But yeah, so if this gets rolling again, we're going to see some absolutely extremely interesting, testimonies and dates.
One of the major things which has always been quite shocking is the scale of this scam, which was actually executed on fiat rails. So a large amount of this cash has been coming in via cash payments going directly into bank accounts. It'd be interesting to understand, who else is in the firing line, because there's surely a network of people fairly high up who are able to help launder this cash, to be able to allow this to get in to Dr. Ruja and various others' bank accounts. And there must be a fair amount of culpability there, because this thing ripped on for 4 years without really
we're on nearly 6 years that OneCoin has existed now. So what's interesting is that between 2015, OneCoin raised red flags around the world right off the bat, but it takes time for any law enforcement to investigate something. They have to have, you know, probable cause, and then they have to actually have victims. And that's one of the problems with big Ponzi schemes, is that people that are involved, victims that are involved in these big scams that have donated massive amounts of money, either A, don't believe they're scams because they're invested and they need it psychologically, they need it to win, or they just don't figure out that they've been duped for a much longer period until, you know, until all hope is gone and the websites are shut down and things like that. So it's very difficult in these big scams, including BitConnect and Plus Token and all of these, to establish a victim basis for law enforcement, because you have to have complaints. You have to have complaints about fraud. If there's no victims, or if there's no victims that speak up, then there's no case. And so that's been a problem. But in 2015, OneCoin began to lose some of their bank accounts because they were putting massive amounts of money through these banks. And in 2016, that got even more problematic for them. There were weeks in 2016 that they were pulling in over $60 million, or about 60 million euros a week from this. And of course, when a bank would close, OneCoin promoters would say, oh, well, we're bigger than the banks, and the banks can't handle the volume of money that we're putting in here. And, you know, these guys are claiming that they're, you know, bigger than Apple and, you know, the fastest growing company in the world, which in some respects, maybe it was the fastest growing company in the world. But as the banks began to disappear, and by the end of 2016, by November 30th of 2016, they had lost over 20 bank accounts, at least probably 24 different bank accounts. And at this point, they began pushing a very interesting means of collecting money, and that was through something called gift codes and discount codes. And so the way that would work is, when you recruit someone, you achieve an earning in your back office, and there was both a cash account and a mandatory account, and you basically would receive a 6% commission in cash, quote unquote, cash account for whatever package you sold, and a 4% commission in your mandatory account. Your mandatory account would allow you to utilize that mandatory credit towards purchasing OneCoin or a few other things. But the 6% commission was money that you built into your cash account. So if you spent, or rather if you recruited, say, 2 people with tycoon packages, which are 5,000 euros each, then you would have brought in $10,000 to the company and would have made $600 in your cash account. So now you're looking in your back office and you see these pretty numbers on a screen that indicate that you have $600. But these are just numbers on a screen. A lot of that money is the minute that it came in was, you know, flushed out into different shell companies and things like this. OneCoin had over 126 different shell companies in 20 some odd countries to wash that money and just to dilute it and make it disappear from the books.
So were the OneCoin promoters able
we
to
have
cash...
Duncan.
Sorry.
We have Duncan Arthur in this group, which is really interesting because Duncan was brought in. He's from South Africa and has a banking background, and he was brought in to build the e-commerce site of OneCoin, which is now called Deal Shaker. And so he came in and his team built this marketplace. So it would be the Bitcoin or crypto equivalent of Open Bazaar, but with self-arranged shipping and primarily half fiat and half OneCoin type of, you know, a barter system, because OneCoin was never on the open market. So you couldn't liquidate it. You can't pay your suppliers, your distributors, your warehouses, your employees, things like that. But OneCoin was able to market the Deal Shaker platform in order to provide enough smoke and mirrors that people thought it was real. And
this was their secondary market, wasn't it? This was the big thing where they were saying, this is where you can actually start using OneCoin. You can buy your shirts, your produce. These are going to be out in all these various different, you know, sort of terminals and what have you. That was the real promise of Door Shaker.
Yeah, so we have Duncan in this chat. Interestingly, he did leave the company, of course, and he and I had some fierce attacks over LinkedIn and other things. So I was rattling cages because the three reasons that I started following this and really got involved in it was number one, because this was prior to all the, you know, crypto regulations and things that were going to go down, and I knew that this was just going to expedite it. So because of the scale of this scam, which wasn't a cryptocurrency, but which was pretending to be a cryptocurrency, I knew that there would be massive, you know, regulatory enforcement in these terms, and that was going to raise the barrier of entry for new startups and things like this, and it was just going to make things tougher. And you know, back in 2015, 2016, you know, anyone could easily buy coins. There was no, these hadn't been, you know, deemed securities or anything like this. The regulations just hadn't caught up. But I knew that this was going to expedite that, and I'm like, dude, we're in a great, you know, position right now to where anyone could participate in the market if they just learn about it. And of course, the people that just wanted to get rich quick, that didn't do due diligence, and even some that did, just got wrecked, you know, with a lot of these ICO projects and things. But the second reason that I, you know, began wanting to expose this is because it was going to turn people off from real cryptocurrency, when this was a real evolution in technology, in money, in payment systems, in, you know, decentralized opportunities that took the power away from the authorities. And this was just, you know, perverting it and using the name of it to rip people off. And I just really didn't like that. And I thought, you know what, if someone comes into your office and pisses on your desk, you know, you're just not going to watch. You're not going to stand there and watch that happen. You know, of course, the third reason is the human reason, that a lot of these people are going to be financially devastated. And as you guys know, many invested their homes, their, you know, properties, you know, their savings and all this other stuff. And so I was hoping, you know, and I didn't think in the beginning that it would last more than, say, 6 months. But back to your original question. I'm sorry, what was that?
I was going to say it was quite outlandish in terms of, you know, the ways in which Dr. Rugen and obviously OneCoin were able to kind of jump over these various hurdles. I mean, one of the instances from the regulators being kind of caught flat-footed in the UK was a process with the FCA where they'll list potential scams or, you know, potential actors who they don't have control or regulation over, and they'll list them on their website. And with OneCoin in the UK, they listed OneCoin to start with. But there's a certain period of time that you'll appear on that website for, and then you'll be taken down. Right. Because I think it's a 3-month period. Yeah. So OneCoin used this brilliant opportunity. Yeah. They then, when they got taken down from the website, they wrote a press release and said, actually, look, we're now not on the FCA website. We've, of course, been absconded from all of these charges. OneCoin drives on. And then they brought a huge amount of money in from the UK and Europe after that as well.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, no matter what happened, you know, on the positive side, as far as taking this scam down, when people were arrested, when leaders were arrested, when, you know, meetings were broken up, when, you know, when countries banned it, etc., OneCoin would take that information and somehow throw it into a subterfuge and spit out some sort of crazy propaganda that made it, oh, this is a good thing because look, and the FCA, you know, warning being removed was an easy way for them to, you know, manipulate and twist the truth and capitalize on that. To rewind just a sec, in terms of all those bank accounts being shut down and them implementing these gift codes, what this enabled them to do was, now this money that had been locked into people's cash accounts, which they thought was real money, but it was just numbers on the screen. Now they were able to take that money that was in the cash account and buy OneCoin packages at a discount and then sell them themselves. So if I have $1,000, 1,000 euros in my back office, well, then I could apply that to a gift code for a premium trader package. And then I could actually sell that to my friend or my mom or my brother. And then they would give me the cash because I had just liquidated out my cash account. So what that made me is kind of a distributor. And it would work even more ridiculously from the top coming down. And this operated very much like a cartel, a drug cartel, in that, let's say the country of origin of, tons of cocaine is Colombia. And those tons of cocaine are moved across borders to distributors in New York, in California, in Miami, in London, in different parts of the world. So those distributors have these big package, big volumes of cocaine, and then they break that down into smaller packages and parcel it out to the different counties or states with their dealers. And finally, it gets to a point where, there's the average junkie on the street selling dime bags, if you will. And that's very similar to how OneCoin gift codes could work, because if I didn't have cash in my cash account or couldn't buy a discount code myself, I could go to my team leader. That was my girlfriend's phone ringing. I was like, what is that? Where's that noise come from? Sorry. So the team leader would have X amount of gift codes, and their leader, diamond leader above them, for instance, would also have volumes of gift codes. And so they would pass these discounts down to where they could sell them or have their team sell them on the streets. And then I would collect the money from the person that I sold a pro trader from. So I collect 1,000 euros. I take my 6% commission. I pass that to my team leader, who in turn takes his commission out of that and passes that up as cash or as check. I write it, someone writes me a check, goes into my account. I write my team leader a check, goes into his account. Team leader writes his Black Diamond leader a check, goes into his account. And so that money's still moving all the way up to the very top. And that was genius. And at some point, if the Black Diamond gets a check, he could cash it, and then he could actually pass over cash to the company. And OneCoin had an office in Hong Kong that was not even an office, it was an apartment. And that apartment was freaking full of cash, like to the extent that on not one, but on two occasions, Sebastian Greenwood, number one, and then another leader on two separate occasions came into that apartment and walked out with 100 million euros, stole it, absolutely stole 100 million euros on at least two occasions. So there was just money going up to the ceilings in some of these places, and the money that was going through Dubai and places, oh my gosh, just insane. And I work in addition, I work at a restaurant, but managing and doing some other stuff. But I also started a Bitcoin ATM company. Back in 2014, I put my first Bitcoin machine in Orange County, California. But for the last 4 years, I co-founded a company called Blockchain BTM, and so I've been working in this business. These guys had Bitcoin ATM machines in Dubai that they could take cash and put them into the Bitcoin machines, and then the leaders on the other side could withdraw Bitcoin and hold Bitcoin in, so it's really sick. So although OneCoin didn't collect that much Bitcoin, they did maybe $10 million in Bitcoin or something, like not very big numbers, but they were definitely putting their money in Bitcoin because they couldn't use banks. So, it's just insane. Now, by someone writing me a check for a package, and then me taking my commission and writing my leader a check, and then taking commission and writing their diamond leader a check, we become, in the eyes of the law, distributors. So no longer are we IMAs or independent marketing associates, but we are now distributors for a criminal organization. And so it'll be very interesting to see how and if that plays out in the courts when some of these other big leaders are, we call them misleaders, are rounded up in the future. Because I think that the Department of Justice is going to use this as a opportunity to throw the gauntlet down and try to, set an example. I would hope.
So one question about the promoters, because you said they earned 40% in OneCoin and 60% in cash. But what has been said about
4% and 6%? But Duncan pointed out that some of the biggest leaders earned up to 60%. So
right.
If you're like a crown diamond, which is the very top of the pyramid, and you're making money from every single row down, then essentially 40% of the money ended up going back to the company.
And the money that they
go ahead.
The money that they got in cash, in fiat, and the OneCoin, were they able to cash that out, or was it still on the OneCoin centralized system, which said they had earned X amount of money, but they weren't able to actually cash out into their banks?
The purpose of the discount codes and the motivation behind selling the discount codes is because the cash account stopped working in 2017. Duncan Arthur is chiming in and saying that diamonds could cash out.
So does that mean that only the top promoters could cash out into their bank accounts, but everyone else, they showed a screen that said they'd earned X amount, but they weren't able to get that into their banks?
Right.
So they did a lot of work for OneCoin, but didn't benefit.
Correct, except for when they said, you know what, all this money in my cash account is useless because I can't withdraw it. And no one has been able to withdraw money from their cash account since January of 2017,
right.
Except for, as Duncan pointed out, the top leaders. Mm-hmm. So the hierarchy goes like this. There's Ruja and Sebastian at the very, very, very top. Maybe they have people behind them too, right? The people behind the curtain. And then you have the crown diamonds. So there's maybe 4 or 5 crown diamonds. Beneath them, you have black diamonds, blue diamonds, diamonds. Then there's like emeralds, rubies, sapphires, whatever. And then team managers, and then the common pleb. So throughout that hierarchy, up until you get to 3 levels down, which is diamond, no one below them, which is 95% of the participants, or 97% or more of the participants, can't cash out. But those 3% can definitely cash out because they're promoting the scam and bringing millions of dollars into the company. So the company's like, we got to pay these guys and motivate them to continue stealing.
Okay. So talking to Bjorn Bjerke, who was also on the Missing Cryptoqueen podcast, he said recently the FBI had released a bunch of documents, and that had been covered from public information, but indicating that maybe they've found Rouge, or maybe there's been some really big development recently in the case. Do you know what that is, and do you have any idea who you might think might be behind the OneCoin? Is it the Bulgarian mafia? Is it organized crime? What do you think is really behind it?
As far as any information about Ruja being captured or not, she is either dead, captured, or still in hiding. According to her brother, she personally benefited over 500 million euros. So with $500 million, that buys a lot of protection and a lot of safety and hiding. In terms of the involvement of politicians, authorities, mafia, all of the above took place. And here's why. Because let's say I want to promote OneCoin in Colombia, and I'm going to go in there and steal millions and millions of dollars from the Colombian people. Well, the mafia is not going to sit by. The cartels, more accurately, the mafia cartels, are not going to sit by and just be like, okay, yeah, come into the country and steal money. Because if they steal millions and millions of dollars, no, they haven't caught her will, that we know of. if they're going to come in and steal millions and millions, tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, then that's taking money away from their business. And so what's going to have to happen, and which has happened, is that the cartels are going to contact those leaders and put them under threat. And they're going to be like, look, you're doing business in our neighborhood, and you don't do business in our neighborhood unless we're getting a cut. So if you're not paying, then you're either cut off or we're going to kill you or something like this. So this happened as far as Asian mafia goes, as far as Spanish and, South American and Central American mafia goes. They realized that, that this cash cow was operating in their turf, and they're not going to let just someone come into their turf. They're ruthless, and they're going to make money on it. So, but not only that, what we saw, especially in countries in Southeast Asia and areas like this, even the police are barely making, a living wage just because of some of the economies there. And so it's very easy to bribe authorities. And that has happened in Thailand and Vietnam and in Cambodia and in other areas where OneCoin would come in and they would pay off both politicians and authorities to essentially just look the other way and allow that distribution to go on. And at the highest levels, the United States government, which this is unrelated to OneCoin, but the United States government, it's, been kind of revealed, has made deals. The CIA has made deals with Mexican drug cartels to kind of give them a little bit of a kind of a safe haven to import their heroin and their methamphetamines and their cocaine, in order for those the highest level cartels to rat out all of their competition, because the US or big governments would rather deal with one or two problems rather than 50 or 100 problems. And so if the most powerful, and it's just like, it's corporatization almost. And it's almost like regulatory capture, a term that Andreas Antonopoulos loves to use. And regulatory capture, as many of you know, is if, say, a utility company comes in and they're polluting lakes and, doing all these, I guess polluting and putting out stuff that's bad for people, then a lot of those companies, anyone in that industry is probably doing something similar. And so the biggest companies will impose their own restrictions on how much they can pollute and things like that, and then lobby for that. And it'll cost them millions and millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, because they have to, produce better, tighter, more safe equipment or whatever. But the other ones, the cost to upgrade to operate in that manner is so expensive that it drives them out of business. So in the same way, when the government would make deals with these cartels in order to eliminate their competition, it would just be like kind of an under the table kind of handshake deal. And now they only have to make with so many. So yeah, OneCoin was super clever. And, the Bulgarian government is obviously one of the most corrupt governments on earth. And, if you're paying some of the top police information to inform on what's going on, that's exactly what happened which led to Ruja disappearing. She had access to information from authorities and police. It was 4 months after Ruja disappeared that Europol and Germany and USA and several governments had raided their offices in Sofia on January 18th of 2017 or 2018, and she, Ruja had already disappeared in October.
Just in terms of some of those figures of authority, have we had any kind of murmurings or indication that any of these guys are going to be held to account? Have you heard of any, sort of governmental people who are going to be tried, or any speculation around that at all? Or is this sort of something we we sort of think might pan out over the next sort of long period of 2, 5, 10 years as this kind of unravels?
I really think the latter. And the reason that I think that is because when Sebastian Greenwood was arrested in Thailand in September of 2018 and then extradited to the US, we received inside information. And when I say we, there's other, a small group of others like myself who've kind of been fighting this for a long time, and people that have been involved in the organization or whose families it has affected and things like that, who have information, have reached out to us and given us like really cool, like inside information. And someone tipped us off to the fact, I think it was like this in December. So Sebastian Greenwood was captured and then extradited in September of 2018. And it wasn't until September, October, November, late November, that someone tipped us off. Hey guys, what are you doing? Don't you know that Sebastian Greenwood was captured? And if you look in Thai media, you'll find it. And there was one article in Thai media that mentioned this cooperation between FBI and Thailand officials to extradite Sebastian Greenwood. But had we not found that or been tipped off to that, we would still, well, not to this day, but up until very recently, not know that Sebastian Greenwood was even captured. So the FBI and the Department of Justice are operating a very hush-hush kind of operation as far as prosecuting these guys. And I don't think that they're going to be forthcoming. If Ruzia was captured tomorrow or last week or last month or 3 months ago, we wouldn't know unless we were tipped off or someone told us, because I think that just to build the case around, something so massive and so big, and to try to dismantle and take it down, I think that it's just a crazy task for, the district attorneys and prosecutors. And they don't want to let that information out.
Just on that point, obviously you have this incredibly strong figurehead, Ruja, and then you've had this kind of cult-like following and strength of this sort of branding of this thing. And it's almost, if you're talking in the startup world, it's almost pivoted and branched off other scams because of the strength of that kind of spine. And a number of the Q&As which are coming in on some of these spin-offs where the same MLM guys who have been promoting for OneCoin have now almost pivoted and moved on to some of these other projects. Have you been following any of these? We've got Tara who asked about the OneLink project. There's also another one called Dascoin. Yeah. Have you been sort of following up on a few of these things that have sort of,
Yeah. And by the way, this has been like watching a train wreck in slow motion, just going off the tracks. And there's all these spin-offs, right? And so what you come to realize when you follow these scams is that there are veterans in the space, and that there's people that have made a career out of scamming. Like literally, that's what they do. What do you do? Oh, I'm a career scammer. I mean, if they were being totally honest, I've been doing this for 20 years of my life. I'm very good at it. So when scams like OneCoin begin to collapse, and when OneCoin began to collapse was January of 2017, when they stopped paying out from the cash accounts. And every Ponzi scheme is gonna pay in the beginning. How do you build a Ponzi scheme? You have to pay out. So until there are less members coming in to pay out existing investors, the scam is going to continue to build momentum. And so many of the leaders, like I said, OneCoin was really good at attracting top motivators, motivational speakers, people who had led, in some cases, legitimate multi-level network marketing companies prior, and in many cases that had just successfully run Ponzi scams. Because a Ponzi scam isn't a failure except to everyone who invested. It's a huge success for the ones who built it and the ones who promoted it at the very top levels. They walk away with millions and tens of millions, hundreds of millions in some cases, $500 million in Ruja's case. So this is quite motivating. And some of these people, what's really weird is that some of these people end up being just as drunk on power as they do on money. And so, hold on one second. Yeah. Okay. So some of these people just become super drunk on power, and they just enjoy the lies in the game. And watching this happen is just absolutely, it's remarkable to witness and see these people. So reel me back in here. Kerry Walrus and some of these other guys. Yeah. So when OneCoin stopped paying out, that was kind of a telltale sign for many of the veterans to like, okay, it's time to cash out and bail. And so like Juha Pariella, who was the most successful network marketer in history, he was allegedly making up to $4.2 million a month in OneCoin. And so that was that smashed all records previous. And he was, I think he was getting something like 1% of every new recruit that came into OneCoin. So that was part of his, sign-on deal as a star, like just how a soccer team will recruit the best rookies and this sort of thing.
In the documentary who was buying all the gold Versace. That
was Igor Alberts, and he was making $2.4 million a month.
Still not so bad.
So he and his wife were making about $2.4 million a month. I mean, that's sick.
And that was money they were able to cash out, or was it held on the platform?
No, that was money they were actually able to cash out. So yeah, they were actually able to pull that out, because if the company is bringing in so much, then they want to reward the ones that are bringing, that are recruiting the heaviest, and then at some level just cut everyone else off, and that's exactly what happened. So there was the Islam brothers who had a team called ODT GoPro primarily in like London, but they had members in a lot of states. They had at least 17,000 people, or maybe it was 27,000 in their downline. And when they left OneCoin, they went to some mining scam, and then they went to, they've been in 4 or 5 different scam companies that have all collapsed since then, and they walked away with massive money each time. So I don't think that these people are indemnified from prosecution legally. I'm sure that the Islam brothers will be taken down. It's just sad that it takes so long for law enforcement to react, and it's a daunting task. OneCoin partnered with at least I think 7 collapsed Ponzi schemes, particularly back in 2015 and 2016. And by doing so, they acquired the databases of previous people who had invested in these previous scams. And one of those scams was called Bonifa. And in April of 2016, Bonifa founders, 3 of them, were arrested. And it was on the front page of the UK Times. And the Times said that Bonifa was a $100 million Ponzi scam. That's a lot of money. $100 million Ponzi scam. So the 3 leaders are in handcuffs on the front page of the UK Times in April of 2016. In August of July or August of 2016, OneCoin announced that they had partnered with Bonifa. And what does that mean? That just means that they acquired the database of all the victims, which I'm sure that they paid good money for. And they did this with several different companies. And can you please close that door? Okay, great. So yeah, that's how they built these scams. And so when a lot of the people started, top leaders, 95% of the top leaders have left OneCoin already, and many of them have either just gone underground because they made enough money that they can sit tight for a few years, or they've started their own or joined other scams.
I mean, it's just riveting how these guys are so public. As you say, 27,000 customers and still able to evade regulators and the law. while still continuing on, some of these scams in various other formats. One of the questions we had a little bit earlier was actually the involvement of the Bank of Ireland. We had a question around some of the testimonies or lack of testimonies coming from employees there. Would you be able to maybe shed a bit more light on that particular case and their involvement?
Sure. So OneCoin, as I had mentioned earlier, had like 126 different shell companies at one point. And so each of these shell companies, in theory, would be able to open their own bank accounts, right? And so, but at the higher levels, there's so much money moving through OneCoin that at the higher levels, this is where they hired companies like Finaro, the Finaro funds, and Mark Scott and his law firm, to manage these quote unquote investments under these shell companies. And so that's how they're moving this 400 million, which is like $50 million at a time, or $20 million, or $100 million at a time, into different bank accounts. And so when you're moving, I mean, I don't know how it is in UK, but if you deposit just $10,000 here in the US into your bank account, then that triggers what's called a CTR report. And a CTR is a cash transaction report that banks have to produce and make available to the IRS and to the regulatory bodies that are governing these banks. And so for higher cash deposits, especially, and OneCoin dealt primarily in cash, these things become suspicious. And when something becomes suspicious, whether or not it's Melius was one of the names of the Islam Brothers companies. Yeah. Whether, when you're moving this amount of money, this could trigger also, in addition to a CTR, but a SAR, which is a suspicious activity report. And so a banker that sees, and because I work in Bitcoin ATMs, we have SAR reports that both we have to do on our customers in certain situations, and that banks do on us when we make large deposits, I'm sure. But a SAR just outlines why is this a suspicious activity? Well, because there's $30 million that are moving from this account to another account, and we don't know the source of funds. And so there's the source of funds, and then there's also the source of wealth. And so a bank needs to establish from its customers the KYC part, the know your customer part, and the AML, the anti-money laundering. These are all kind of go hand in hand. And so in order to be compliant with the anti-money laundering standards, you have to know your customer. And in knowing your customer, you need to know if they're moving a huge amount of money, where is that money coming from? And if it's a massive amount of money, where is that wealth coming from? And so that's what triggered most of the bank shutdowns. And I think that, did I deviate from what the point was here?
I think the question was specifically around Bank of Ireland's involvement.
Right. So Bank of Ireland's involvement.
Yeah.
Right. And so they let a lot of these activities and these massive transfers kind of slip through, because Gilbert Arment and Mark Scott were able to, at first, provide a decent enough explanation for the source of funds, but ultimately they determined that the Bank of Ireland determined that they needed more information, and that's where they got pushback from Mark Scott. And eventually Bank of Ireland just said, no, we can't do business with you anymore. But they'd already had a couple $100 million laundered through Bank of Ireland by this point, or I would say over 100 million. So they kind of caught it late, because they asked more questions and those questions couldn't be answered. And Bank of Ireland, some of the management there began to notice that some of the people that were CC'd on some emails, particularly Irina Delkinska, who was formerly the head of OneCoin Legal and Compliance, which of course we always called OneCoin's head of illegal and non-compliance. She was a partner with Mark Scott on several of these companies, particularly the Finaro funds. That's what it was, yeah. And one of those CCs had Irena at onecoin.eu. And so then the bank began they said, okay, that's interesting. So they're trying to source these funds independently and verify the information that Mark Scott's telling them. And they look up onecoin.eu and find that it's this massive, quote unquote, cryptocurrency that's bringing in tons of money and whatnot. And that's not what Mark Scott had told them. Mark Scott had said that these are private individual investors that are, just looking to move money into hedge funds. And so there was a little bit of investigative work on the Bank of Ireland side in order to do this, but the argument is that it should have happened earlier. And that's why Bank of Ireland could have been held liable, and that's for that money laundering, which is exactly what it was, and why, and one of the two reasons, at least, why Bank of Ireland employees did not want to come to the U.S. to testify against Mark Scott, because number one, they could be held liable for letting that money get laundered, and number two, they don't want to testify against the mafia. Nobody wants to testify against the mafia.
Just incredible. I mean, do we think there's going to be, any regulatory fines for Bank of Ireland or any of those others involved in actually allowing them to hold these large amounts of cash, or nothing in the near term, I guess?
No, I mean, look, there's super, super rich people that move a lot of money around. They have to be able to move a lot of money around. And what would have to be determined is if there was gross negligence on the part of Bank of Ireland. On one hand, looking out, at the bird's eye view, you can think that, yeah, there was, but what they're being told is not, yeah, can you move this money from here to Germany to IMS, International Monetary Services, or International Marketing Services, which was one of the top leader in OneCoin's shell companies that he'd set up, which caused the Germany to ban OneCoin altogether. There was money going from Bank of Ireland to Germany, and at first, I mean, the bank wants to do business with people. They want to hold hundreds of millions of dollars because of the fractional reserve system. If I get $100 million, I can loan out 900 million of that or invest it in other, financial instruments. That's how fractional reserve banking works. So it's in the bank's best interest to have as much money in the bank as possible. So there's a fine line between, okay, is there illegal funds here or is there not legal funds here? HSBC was one of the biggest banks, is one of the biggest banks in the world. And some years back, the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico, which is the gnarliest, craziest cartel in the world, they hang people over bridges and chop people's heads off with chainsaws and do crazy, boil them in acid and all kinds of crazy stuff, right? Well, HSBC Bank in I think it was in Tijuana, had the windows of the bank cut out exactly in the size of a suitcase, of a mafia suitcase, cartel suitcase. And so the cartel would just come in and take their suitcases full of, tens of millions of dollars and slip them right through, and HSBC would sign off on it. And they were fined like $1 point something billion for laundering money for the Sinaloa cartel, the most violent drug cartel on
and no
earth.
one got convicted.
And this is
I remember that.
Yeah,
very well. Yeah,
the banks are so crooked. They have every incentive to be the biggest money launderers in the world because there's a lot of money in money laundering.
Well, you had Wells Fargo recently as well, creating fake accounts.
Yep.
If not thousands, I seem to remember. And again, not a huge amount has been heard of that afterwards. It seems like OneCoin's still going in some cases. We still have a One Life website up. It still like this thing you cut the head off, but it still continues on.
It's a complete hydra. You cut one head off and two more grow back. And
Bjorn said that it's growing now in Australia. Bjorn said that it's getting even worse.
Certain areas that it's growing in. I don't know how much it's growing in Australia, but there is a strong community in Australia. The way that these things work is with a well-planned marketing roadmap. They launch in first world countries, you know, UK, United States, you know, well-to-do countries. But because first world countries, higher regulations, then they know there's going to be a short shelf life in those countries. And so what their objective is to get in and get out, because you have people like one of the doctors that is part of the class action lawsuit here in the United States. He invested, this is a doctor, okay? This guy invested $758,000 into OneCoin personally. And I think it was more about his wife probably, you know, getting into it. But, you know, there are people in the US who invested over $100,000. And so OneCoin came in, grabbed the money from the individuals as quickly and as much as possible, and then exited a few months later. And then it went to kind of not the first world, but kind of the second world, you know, areas and stuff like this. And then they went in there and then they just struck really hard, and they were able to stick around for a while. And so what happens is eventually, you know, regulators here pop up, countries issue warnings, you know, things like this occur over the course of time. And then they're like, okay, we're, you know, kind of being pushed out of, you know, these second world countries. So what do? The plan always is to then focus on the third world countries. So that's the last, you know, crop dusting, you know, raking up of the last of the money that can come in, because on continents like Africa, which has 56 countries, many of those countries just have the poorest people. In Central and South America, there are, you know, countries that are just, they don't have a lot of money. But what they have is they have a lot of food. And that family depends on each other in order to work together for crops and for marketing and for, you know, to basically run that family and put food on the table. And so when you're in the first world, all you need to do is strike a couple rich guys and make some cash. When you're in the third world, all you need to do is strike some big families, because everyone in that family will put in $10, right? And so now you have 200 members of this family that have all pitched in for these giant packages and things like that. And you know, there's 40, 50 members, uncles, brothers, sisters, cousins, that are all, yeah, rah, rah, rah. And these people are then, you know, all excited about it, and they're infecting massive communities. So the numbers really are grow in the third world countries. And so some areas that are very much affected. And by the way, in foreign countries where they don't speak English or have as much access to information and news, they're not going to know that, you know, that OneCoin has been prosecuted and kicked out of so many countries and bank accounts closed and all these sorts of things. So Vietnam, Thailand, still a lot of countries in Asia and Africa are still promoting and growing this scam. And it's just astonishing. It's really sad.
Absolutely. So, I mean, just sort of wrapping this up slightly, in terms of the timeline now of the trial itself, what do you expect to happen over, say, the next 12 months or so? We've obviously got this delayed kind of adjournment and sentencing in November. I mean, I know it's quite hard to speculate on, but please do. What do you think is going to happen over this next sort of 12-month period?
So what I hope happens that within this next 12-month period, that these dates are not pushed back any further, because, you know, the longer that these dates are pushed back, the more victims that are gathered. And so there's been so many times that, you know, that something has happened where, you know, China arrested 112 OneCoin promoters through Operation Hurricane and prosecuted 98 of 112 of them and sent 33 of them to jail, right? And so it's instances like that where you're like, oh my gosh, this is great. Look, China just arrested 112 and prosecuted 98 of them. 33 went to prison. Obviously, no one will join this anymore. So, but that's not what happens. That's not what. So there's been so many successes that have seemed like successes. We're like, yes, finally, this thing is collapsing. And then the next thing you know, they're hosting massive deal shaker, events, and, bringing in hundreds of more people. Just this week in one of our closed groups, someone shared a picture in Vietnam of an assembly hall full of hundreds of people there for OneCoin recruitment. And it's just crazy. So what I hope happens is that we have public access to the Sebastian Greenwood trial, particularly, and to the Gilbert Armenta trial if he doesn't plea bargain out of it. But I think that they're going to prosecute Greenwood, and I don't think he's going to get a plea bargain. Greenwood's been in half a dozen scams or more, and has been a criminal, Ponzi career con artist for at least 15 years. So in those trials, there's over 70,000 pages of documents that the Department of Justice had collected, just for the Mark Scott and Constantine cases, and Constantine plea bargained out, and so he didn't have to go to trial. But in those cases, we should see some really, really interesting revelations, like we did in Mark Scott's trial, because we found out that, that Constantine himself had been kidnapped, had a gun put in his mouth, and someone, the mafia that was after them broke his finger and stuff like that. And speaking of mafia and the criminality of this whole thing, at the beginning of this month in Mazatlan, Mexico, which is incidentally in the Sinaloa state where the Sinaloa cartel started, there were 2 OneCoin promoters who were murdered, and they were suffocated, and parts of them were put into a suitcase and then thrown out into, an empty field. And so there's still more information coming out about that. But what we know about it is that these guys were like young. They're like, under 30 years old, or 30 or under, and looked like nice people. But, who knows? The sad thing is that there's so many people that are promoting it that just honestly believe this. They've just been indoctrinated, and they just believe. But then, of course, there's absolutely ruthless criminals that know that it's a scam and are just trying to milk it while they can. So this deal shaker thing, right, which is the OneCoin marketplace where you can trade your ones for usually cheap Chinese junk that's double priced. They have been notorious for having fake cars and fake gold and fake homes and stuff like that have been listed on there, but no one's ever bought a home for OneCoin. No one's ever bought a car for OneCoin. No one's ever bought, any of gold for OneCoin. All of these have just been scams. These two people that were murdered just 2 weeks ago were involved in a company out of Argentina, which was supposedly selling automobiles for partial payment in OneCoins. And there had been at least 243 people in Argentina and over 100 in Mexico who had put down deposits for these vehicles. And the company simply took the money, took the deposits, never got back to anyone. Of course, no cars were delivered, anything like this. And so these guys apparently pissed off the wrong people or the wrong family, and they got they got kidnapped, thrown in a suitcase, suffocated, and thrown out in the field. It was just crazy. But that's what happens when you piss off, scam certain people, I guess.
Are there people who you still believe in OneCoin now?
For sure. Yeah. Every week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I get a message, and we have Jen McAdam in the chat here as well, who deals with this on a daily or weekly basis. But people that come to the realization that this is no longer adding up, and we have to be honest with ourselves, and what the haters, me, Jen, some of the others of us have been saying can't be proven wrong and must be correct. And people are just coming to the realization that what they invested, what they believed in, what they often wasted a lot of, the last couple of years for, and what they've recruited their friends and family into has all been a lie. And so that realization has to be one of the most difficult things to deal with. And when given that option to believe that you got scammed. And not only did you get scammed, but you brought your mom in, you brought your sister, your cousin, and they all put in tens of thousands of dollars collectively or more. In Jen's case, her friends and family had put in over 250,000 pounds in just a short period of time. And she came to the realization that not only have I been duped, but I have inadvertently led all these people down the path that I believed in, and we all just got screwed. And how do you face people like that? You know, it's like these people, it's everyone has to do their own due diligence, and no one's responsible for what happens with their money other than themselves. But, you know, that's a terrible, terrible burden to carry on your shoulders.
Why are we losing Tim? No, absolutely. And as you say, Tim, I think it's so incredibly hard after, you know, stacking all of this kind of emotion and links with family and so on, to be able to face that reality. It's a lot easier to believe, right? Once you've got all of this money invested.
It's just it's way too big a pill to swallow, I think. And so that pill, all of a sudden, it starts like this big, and it's sitting on the desk or on the shelf back there. And then all of a sudden it's just getting bigger, and all of a sudden it's the elephant in the room and the 900-pound gorilla. And at some point you're just blocking it for as long as you possibly can, but at some point it has to be addressed. If you're an honest person, you have to address the elephant in the room. And you're like, and of course, when you ask questions in groups, you know, there's tons of WhatsApp groups and Telegram groups and things like. You ask a question that they don't like, you're kicked out of the group. You're warned, and then you're kicked out. Where's our money? Where's Ruja? Why is all the leaders leaving? You're just being negative. You're listening to the haters. You're just jealous. Bye. You're kicked out. Remove the opposition. You know, if you have a cult or a group and someone doesn't believe in the cult or the group, and they're not following the leader, they're disappeared. They're kicked out. You can't have mutiny in a group.
Jen McAdams just posted that they've got over 10,000 OneCoin victims in their support groups, including suicidal and very depressed people. So,
yeah. I have something else that I can share in dealing with and working in the Bitcoin ATM business and the crypto ATM business for the past several years, is that, you know, we've implemented a policy for the past almost 3 years that, and this is a controversial policy because of just the nature of Bitcoin, but for any first-time transactor transacting over a certain, we've set our controls to flag that transaction. And I'm very glad that we've done that, because a significant percentage of the time that first-time transactor is putting, say, $1,000 into the machine, you know, I'll go and I'll review that transaction, and our Bitcoin machines have, you know, cameras and stuff like that. And a lot of times you'll see someone, you know, trying to transact and they're on the phone, and maybe they're like 70, 80 years old. And obviously what's taking place is there's a scammer on the other end of the phone that is instructing them how to put money into the machine in order to send Bitcoin that then can't be charged back. And so we've saved customers and stopped scammers from using our machine. We've saved probably $350,000 in the last 3 years, like literally. And these scams are so diverse. The most common are catfishing and romance scams. And the way that those work is that someone messages you and friends you on Facebook or other social media, and takes several weeks or even months to build a relationship, gain your trust, and then ask for money. And these scammers, what they'll do is they'll have a stable of, say, 20 different people that are in different time periods, a couple weeks, a couple months, or whatever, before they execute that scam. And because they have this stable, if they ask 3 people for money, they're like, yeah, you're crazy. No way, I'm not going to give you money. They still have 16 more that they can do that to, or they can wait till the right moment to do this. And they'll say that they're, you know, engineers, self-employed in another country, their helicopter broke down, they don't have access, you know, their drill bit for their drilling apparatus broke. And, you know, these are all people that claim that they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars. And these people just are fooled by that. There's people claiming to be from the IRS, from the Social Security office, that, you know, I had someone put money in the machine before we started implementing this a couple of years ago that got a call from the police that said her husband was just arrested for DUI and she needed to, you know, send this money, and she was Asian and she, you know, didn't speak very good English. And so she had sent money to the quote unquote police to bail her husband out of jail, which she was frantic about, and she had just gotten scammed. And so there's just so many, you know, I saw one of the ones that they led us to that we uncovered was a company had mirrored Airbnb, like completely mirrored the website. And this person thought that they were reserving, you know, a room on Airbnb, and we caught it. And we catch 98% of these, right? And the 2% that slipped through are because they lied to me. And they weren't true. Oh, I'm just sending this to my brother. It's someone I know, you know, whatever. And so it's been interesting to see the psychology of people getting scammed, trying to outfox me to let them send their money to scammers. You know, there's check cashing scams that people will deposit, you know, send the victim a check or even Zelle money into their account and say, yeah, you keep $100 and ZipRecruiter, you know, they'll recruit personal assistants and send them checks, $1,000 check, you know, you keep, you know, $70, put the rest in the machine, and then we'll keep doing this. And in some cases, after 3 to 5 business days, those checks, which because the bank knew the person, but eventually, and so they cashed the check, but after 3 to 5 business days, everything batched out and that check was fraudulent. And now that person's out $1,000. Or in some cases, someone might get these checks and continue doing this because they're a valuable money launderer who's inadvertently money laundering money, you know, money for some criminal organization or thing or whatever. Of course, it doesn't just happen with Bitcoin machines, but Bitcoin machines are popular because of the irreversibility. It happens with, you know, Apple gift cards and other gift cards, and, you know, they have people buying electronics and stuff like this. But man, there's just so many scammers. There's so many, and it's terrible. I hate it. And what I hate about it is it gives Bitcoin and crypto a bad name, and that's why I fight against it.
But just on that point, I mean, as you say, I think these things are going to be prevalent, and that they have been, you know, since the dawn of time. You know, people were trying to get a quick buck, get money for nothing. You know, Tim, you've obviously been involved in this quite a lot. You've dealt with a lot of the people who've been affected by this particular crypto scam. Maybe give us the 3 points to look out for when looking to, you know, invest your money, or to be aware of some of these scams before you get affected by them.
For sure. First and foremost, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Secondly, you must do your due diligence. You don't invest in things that you don't understand or you haven't investigated for yourself. So if there's an income opportunity that sounds interesting, what you need to do is you need to verify. Look, it's like the blockchain. Blockchain motto is don't trust, verify. You need to verify who these people are, what their history is, because if they're successful now in this scam, and this is a successful scam that's going to make you rich, then there should be a history of these people who have done this. How long has this company been in existence? Where are their offices? Sometimes Google mapping these offices will lead to a swamp in the middle of the Ozarks, and that's the address that they put. You have to look at everything. Do they have LinkedIn profiles? How long has, you know, if you go to whois.com is one of my favorite first flag sites. If you get the name of if you get a URL from a company, copy that rather, go to whois.com and then paste that into the search engine, and it'll tell you when that company or when that website was first registered, when it was updated, and whether the information on there is public or private. So if this is a company that says that they're so successful and that they're doing all kinds of business and whatnot, then how long have they been around? If they've only been around 3 or 6 or even 12 months, then how credible is that? Secondly, a lot of these scams talk in very vague terms. And this is what OneCoin did as well. For instance, we are a group of professionals who have collectively been in the finance business for over 100 years. But who are these individuals? The website doesn't say who these people are. We, professional traders for Forex markets, blah, 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 we're a group of them. And a lot of these are just copy pasted from various other scams and are super vague. Is there a phone number? Can you reach these people? How do you get a hold of them? Is there live customer support? Those are very important. A lot of times scammers will steal your identity and put your face on the LinkedIn and your LinkedIn on their project. And when they have pictures of people, do the links to those pictures work? Usually, if I'm a legitimate, say, ICO back in the ICO days, or a legitimate company for that matter, if I have my team, usually you can click on the team and there'll be a drop down or something that goes to number 1, LinkedIn, number 2, the Twitter account, number 3, etc. Right? If they're obfuscating that, or if those links don't work, then there's a problem. I've come across scam sites that have several pages, and I'll look at every single page and I'll click them. And so the first page, looks nicely designed, and the second page tells a little bit about the company or whatever. And then I go to a couple other, of the pages, and all of a sudden it's lorem ipsum blue, and I'm like, oh my gosh, dude.
It's scam. They don't want to do tech.
Yeah. and scammers are lazy too. In a lot of cases, not all scammers are lazy, but most of them are lazy, and they're like, okay, no one's going to look at the 5th page. All we got to do is fake the first 5, look them up at the Better Business Bureau. Another thing that you'll find is when you look up their address at the bottom of the, of some of these sites, it'll say their address. So I copy the address, paste it in there, and I look it up on Google Maps, see what the building looks like, and then I also Google it. And many times what I find out is that it's a Regis office, so it's a virtual office, so it's not a real office place. And a lot of times it'll come up as just some residential house or something like this, like a little shack or whatever. But yeah, you really gotta do your due diligence. You gotta look at these things.
Cool.
Absolutely. So in terms of, you are speaking at the Crypto Curry live session. In terms of curries, what's your favorite curry, Tim? That's the real important question we've been waiting for the last 90 minutes.
My real name, this is funny. My real name is Timothy Curry. I go by Tim Tayshun online. That's a former DJ name, but I got to be my own favorite person, right? So when I've worked with Jen McAdam and when I've worked with my group Bjorn, Crypto Exposed and things like this, the objective has always been to gain media attention, get authorities involved, get websites and banks shut down. So we've reported banks, we've reported the fraud as much as possible to try to mitigate the damage that will be done. And what's happened and what we've seen over the last 5 years is that, crypto media started covering it a little bit. The first article I wrote was for Bitcoin.com in June of 2016, and that went viral. That was the #1 most read article in 2016. Now it has like over 250,000 views. In the first week it had like 5,000 shares and 33,000 views. But the point was to try to keep moving it up. So when we finally got to BBC, we had several successes because we were in street press, not we, but talked about exposing the OneCoin scam in street press, which was big in France. And we, had other medias that was pumping this information out to try to warn people. And then BBC's, podcasters obviously warned a lot of people and gave a lot of attention. And this continues. So we're continuing to pursue more mainstream media to get the attention of this, to give not only scam warnings about OneCoin, but so that people can recognize how other scams are and will mimic it. The second thing that I've done and what I would really like to see happen in the crypto community, because we've always talked about, if anyone's been in crypto for a while, we're like, oh, we just want to self-police so that the regulators don't come in and regulate the hell out of us, right? But we don't self-police. We have to if we're gonna say we want to self-police, we have to self-police. So one of the things that I've adopted over the past 2 or 3 years is making memes about these scams, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. Just attacking and spamming these scammers and the promoters and things. Like, we've scared so many people out of OneCoin, and including top leaders, you know, because we'll take their posts and, you know, go to Twitter and tag FBI and FCA and all these things, but we have to be proactive. So, I mean, that's the one thing that I hope that there's a takeaway, is we can all fight. And if all of us do just a little bit, then it makes a lot more impact than just if some of us do a lot.
Cool. No, thank you so much. It's been super, super interesting and valid points at the end. So grateful, Tim, grateful for all the questions. We'll let you go back to your day. And
Cool.
yeah, thank you. Bye.
All right. See ya.